So the respiratory system, the functions are to deliver oxygen, to get rid of carbon dioxide, to filter the air that's coming into our body, maintain blood pH, to help fluid control, and to produce sound as far as our voice box on our throat. So this stands for upper respiratory tract, and it's made of the nose, the pharynx, which is our throat, and the larynx, which is our voice box. And then the lower respiratory tract is the thoracic cavity, the bronchial tree, and the lungs. So let's go back to the pharynx and the upper respiratory tract. The pharynx, I refer to as anterior and posterior. Think as if somebody's, I'll try to draw as face is this way. So this would be anterior of the pharynx, and the pharynx right here. So anterior part, posterior part. This is what this is about. The anterior part is made out of the larynx and the trachea, but the posterior part is made out of the esophagus and digestive system. How does that work? It's because when it gets right to here, it bifurcates. It separates into two. So I drew this. It separates into two. But there's something really important about this bifurcation, and it's called the epiglottis. Let me try to. And then make sure that's spelled correctly. So what happens to the epiglottis is that it divides this tube into two. So let's say that you need to take a really big, deep breath. The lid, the epiglottis, would fold this way. So you would be breathing air down here. So now you drink water. So here are your lungs. You drink water. Water cannot come down and go towards your lungs because we can choke and suffocate. So that on that situation, the lid of the epiglottis would fold this way, shutting off the little opening for our lungs, and water can come in and go down our stomach. So that's how the epiglottis work. Okay, in the larynx, there's the Adam's apple, which is the thyroid cartilage, and the larynx keep the respiratory tract open because we don't need to think about, let me close my epiglottis so I can take a deep breath. We don't do that. The larynx does that by, brain control. We don't think of it. It's always open. It also will guard. It guards from what? From particles. Water cannot go down my lungs, or if I'm doing something with something that's dusty and powder goes down, not powder but dust goes down, the pharynx will cough and get rid of the particles so it doesn't damage the lungs, and the white blood cells don't have to fight off that dust and the microbes that comes with. Also in the larynx we have our vocal cords, and that will obviously produce our voice. So now this is my picture of the lungs. It's not very pretty, but it will allow us to review what we need to review. So here's the larynx. This is where the Adam's apple are, and also you can only see the Adam's apple in guys. We cannot see them in girls. And so this part would be the larynx, and my voice box will be behind here. And then this tube down here would be my trachea. And then my trachea divides into left. Remember that I'm seeing someone else's lungs, not mine. So this would be their left side, and this would be their right side. So As we go down, branches into two, and then farther branching happens. So as it farther branches, it will be called the bronchi. And so we have the right and left bronchus, and then it breaks down to the bronchi. And these small little ones are called the bronchiole. And the respiratory tree would be just as far as it goes into the lungs, the more it breaks it apart. So the more it divides it. What else can we say? The right side of the lungs, the right lung, has 3 lobes, because they're the same, but they're different in as far as segments, how many segments they have. And here we have the left side of the brain that has only 2 lobes. So right side has 3 lobes, left side has 2 lobes. This space right here is the cardiac notch. It's where the heart sits. So it has to make room for the heart within the thoracic cavity. So that's where the heart would sit. This green right here is the diaphragm, is the muscle that allows inhalation and exhalation. Then the pink is the pleura, and the pleura is a membrane that covers directly the lung tissue, and then there's a space and there's another pleura on top of it. This is like the sac that encloses the heart and allows it to, when it expands and decreases in size, and not to be rubbed against anything and not to get hurt. And remember that those 2 layers of pleural membranes, they are filled with a fluid. So the lungs starts from the clavicle all the way down to the diaphragm, and remember the diaphragm is the muscle right under the heart, and it has a what can we call, it's not a bowl shape. If you think of a bucket that you carry, the handle of the bucket, it goes up and down, but it has this like seminular shape, like a half of an arch. That's kind of how the diaphragm is, especially when we take a breath and we exhale. So let's talk again about the bronchial, the respiratory tree. So when we swallow something and it goes down our lungs, while it's through right here, we can cough it out. There's cilia in here, and we can cough it out and spit it out. But when it gets down to our lungs and the small bronchioles of our lungs, we don't have any more cilia. So we rely on macrophage, the white blood cells, to come in and fight off everything that's being deposited in there. And it also has a different type of cell wall right here, because it has to be really thin, because the bronchiole is where gas is exchanging, so a difference in cell wall formation will start from here. Okay, now let's talk about the pulmonary ventilation. Is air going in and out. When the air goes in, it's called inhalation, and the air comes from increased pressure to a decreased pressure place. So the outside, the pressure is higher than inside of our lungs, and that will cause the lungs to be forced into our lungs. But also it needs muscles. So we use muscles around between our rib cages. So every muscle between every rib, we have little muscles that go this way and other little muscles that goes this way. They help to grab the ribs and pull them up, so that way there's more room for air to come in. And also when you see somebody they're running or sprinting and they get really, really tired and they put their hands on their knees, is because not only the ribs right here are being pulled up, but the muscles on their shoulders, they attach to their shoulders and to their clavicles, are being pulled up also. So it's like the body asks for assistance of neck and shoulder muscles to pull that thoracic cavity up so they can get more air into the lungs. And then exhalation is a passive process, and it allows the muscles to relax. So inhalation needs the muscles, and the air comes in, and exhalation does not need muscle. It's a passive process. Now the pulmonary capillaries and the systemic capillaries. The pulmonary capillaries will exchange oxygen, will exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen in the lungs, and systemic capillaries will exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen in the body. So it could be lower extremities, but it could also be cells, it could be different organs and tissues. Respiratory rate is coordinated by the medulla oblongata and the pons in the brainstem. And the medulla oblongata will regulate the diaphragm contraction. So that muscle, here's when we're relaxed, our diaphragm kind of looks like that too. And when we exhale, it will also be that way. Here is when we take a really deep breath. So from an arched shape, it will be pushed down, so it makes more room. So the medulla oblongata coordinates this. So 2 seconds of this, and then 2 seconds of that. Muscle contracted, muscle relaxed. Contracted and relaxed. Relax, it's exhalation and inhalation. And then the carotid artery and the aorta, there are receptors in there, chemoreceptors. And remember that chemoreceptors are receptors that detects chemicals that are on the aorta, and they can detect when there's a lot of CO2 in the blood. So that increase of CO2 in the chemoreceptors will increase the respiration rate. And then remember that in class, the teacher talked about yawning. So the yawning is just when you're really tired and sleepy and there's not a lot of oxygen in your body, and you yawn really big to take a really deep breath and to exchange all those carbon dioxides for oxygen. And then the pons is what controls the involuntary breathing. So now the alveoli. So now air came inside of our mouth and downward pharynx and larynx and the bronchus and the bronchioles, and now it's on the very, very farther little tree on the lungs. And it looks like a cluster of grape. That's exactly what it looks like. And in those little clusters of grapes, carbon dioxide that came from the right side of the heart will come inside of the alveoli, and oxygen that we just took a really big breath of oxygen will be diffused and taken into the blood. It would be diffused by the capillary, through the capillary, into the pulmonary vein, and it will take this blood back to the left side of the heart so it can go to the body. And then just know that in order for this to happen, the alveoli has to have a very, very thin layer so the molecules can pass in and out through the little spaces. Also, remember that the surface area of the alveoli is the size of a tennis court, so that way it can really exchange molecules. Okay, so now we're almost done with all the reviews, and I'm going to leave this for you guys to review. It's not complicated, it's just reading. It says it all in there. So I didn't want to read it again to you. Go ahead and make a list of the difference between O2 transport and CO2 transport. And then here's the very last things on your PowerPoint for you to look it up. The blood disorders, leukemia, hemophilia, anemia, malaria, varicose veins, and heart murmurs, and also the blood antigens, because I noted on the series of videos you guys don't have the blood antigen video, and I couldn't find it again. So go ahead and read. There's about 3 slides of it. It's not a lot of work to do. I'll go ahead and I'll say maybe a couple words about each disorder, but you really have to go back and check it out yourself. Leukemia would be a disorder with white blood cells, right? Because it's a leukocyte, and I think that the end of the word would indicate it's low amounts of white blood cells. And so look it up and read and learn a lot about it. Hemophilia would be a genetic disorder that's manifested in man, and it's also caused by a defect on the X chromosome of the female. So when the female crosses with the male, the defected chromosome can be passed to the child if it's a boy, and the disease will manifest. They bleed a lot, they need a lot of blood transfusion, and that's it about it. Anemia, there's 3 types of anemia. One that's iron deficiency, one that the sickle cell anemia, where the blood cells are not shaped properly, and there's another one, so go check those out. And malaria is the protozoum, where the mosquito is the vector, and the worm and all of that. Go ahead and review that. Varicose veins is when the blood gets doesn't circulate up towards the right side of the heart really well, so the blood pulls and starts to, because the valves are damaged, it starts to like curl up and accumulate on the lower leg. And then heart murmurs can be because the valve on the left side of the brain is not working properly, or the septum, which would be the division, the muscle between the right and the left side of the heart, it has a hole in it. So there are babies that can be born with that, and there's a hole, and they could go ahead and connect the hole so there's no blood going from the right to the left side of the heart. And that's it. I hope the video helps you guys. Don't forget to check it out. You need at least a couple hours to be able to study all of this, and do good in your exam.